Welcome to our first episode of NU Blockchain Group podcast. This is Tony. I'm co-hosting with Hanki. Today we'll be talking about token sales, and we are very grateful to have Spenser Huang here. Spencer is the previous co-president of NU Blockchain Group. He did some research at Missouri Crypto and is currently working on business operation at Coinlist. So, hey Spencer, welcome to our episode.
Hey Tony, thanks for having me. Good
So,
to be back.
before we move to our topic on token sale, we would love to understand a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so got into crypto around like 2017, a little bit before the bull market really took off. Northwestern has this like externship program where you shadow an alumni for a few days. And I was lucky enough to go to Union Square Ventures, which is a VC firm based in New York, which is pretty known for their crypto investments during that time period. Specifically, they were like really famous for their fat protocol thesis. So I learned about Bitcoin and crypto there. I was super interested in it, and ended up doing a lot of research myself. So spent that summer and that fall just doing research in crypto myself. Was exposed to this opportunity to help this guy start a crypto fund at the time. So I helped him out for a little bit. Then similar to a lot of funds back in fall of 2017, early 2018, that I found out this guy really didn't know very much about crypto and blockchain, and was kind of just being opportunistic. So decided to quit and go back to the fundamentals and really dig down on like the technology, really understand the economics and everything. So spent the following few months just really researching things. And my friend Donish at the time was one of my other closest friends who was really into crypto as well. So he and I just spent a lot of time at college just talking about crypto all the time, reading about things, trying different projects. Following that, I ended up working at Masari that summer and that fall. So Masari is a data company and like a research company within the crypto space. So they work on a lot of research reports nowadays, and I helped with their research arm at the time. Doing reports, doing market intelligence. So I interned there for the summer, kept doing it for the fall. I was spending like my senior year, I was like spending 2 weeks in New York. That's where Masari is, and 2 weeks in Chicago at school every month. So I kind of flew between the two places. Eventually, ended my stint at Masari early 2019, and then took a few months off. Then joined Coinlist in January 2020. So been at Coinlist for about a year and a half now. Yeah, my responsibilities are within like the business operations side of the business. So specifically more around like the token issuance side of the business. So, doing token sales, hackathons, validator, KYC, and then thinking about our new product line and stuff. So I'll stop there in terms of my background.
Oh yeah, that's very interesting. I think yeah, in terms of like the people listening, could you explain just a little bit about what CoinList is as a company? And you already kind of explained about what you did, but maybe a little more in depth about that.
For sure. So Coinlist is two sides of our business. So, the one side is like the exchange side. So similar to what you would expect from like Coinbase, Kraken, Gemini, any of these other players in that space. So you can buy crypto, we have different trading pairs, etc. And then we also offer, lending services, staking, custody, pretty standard set of products within like the exchange space. So that's, you know, our new side of our business. And then the other side of our business is kind of what we refer to as our issuer services business, or like, where we service different token projects teams. And that's kind of what we're traditionally known for and what we started the company with. So what that entails is the main thing we do is like token sales, right? So token projects oftentimes will do, seed raise, then followed by different fundraising rounds. Then they come to a point where they're about to launch mainnet and they want to distribute their tokens to the hands of people, right? So then the easiest way to do that is via token sales. So we facilitate that process, and we also help them with other types of things like, help run hackathons to attract developers and like projects being built on the protocol. We help them onboard different validators or network nodes. we recently launched this. We launched this program called Coinlist Seed, which tailors to like much earlier stage projects to like have a demo day for them to reach different investors in the space and like so yeah, that's kind of the issuer service side of the business, and that's kind of where most of my responsibilities lie.
Got it. Cool. So yeah, let's jump into our topic today, which is on token sale. So first thing, right? What does token mean, like in the blockchain context?
Yeah, so most blockchains, or like at least most public blockchains, have some token there. The reason for having a token in these public blockchains is because, a lot of the reason why blockchains are successful is because they're able to incentivize different players to act in a way that is uh, act in a trustless way. And in order to do that, there's a lot of game theory involved, right? And the token is a big component as to like what incentivizes people to act a certain way. So it gives like people a certain stake in order to incentivize certain behaviors. To give you an example, so there's a lot of like for there are a lot of networks oftentimes like these different blockchains need node operators, right, to validate all the transactions, make sure all the things are correct, like Bitcoin, for example, right? You have all these miners out there, like, so what incentivizes these miners to do this activity, right? They have to spend a lot of money and paying electricity to like run these mining rigs, and they also have to spend a lot of capital upfront to purchase these like miners, right? So the only way to incentivize them is to pay them in some way or for them to have some benefit, and that's where the token comes from. That's why the Bitcoin blockchain releases new tokens on a every 10-minute or so schedule, and that gets rewarded to miners who contribute to the network. So that's kind of where the token comes in. Like without that token, basically very few people, if anybody, would even be like incentivized to want to maintain the integrity of the blockchain. So the token is very, very critical for that process.
Got it. So what kind of like service does token provide? I think there's like a type of token called utility tokens, where like people can buy the token and they can later like use it in the platform or project, right?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different types of tokens. So as you said, there's the utility tokens that for example, like Ethereum uses, like Ether is technically a utility token where the token is used for a few use cases. One is like pay transaction fees. One is to like, sometimes to participate in governance. Sometimes it's for like staking. So a utility token just means that you use this token for any interactions on that blockchain, right? And then there are other types of tokens like governance tokens, for example, such as like Rally or like uh, ESDS, which or like a lot of these like DeFi protocols, we're seeing a lot of them adopting governance tokens where they have this token that is used by the community to vote on any like changes to the protocol. So for example, in like Rally, like the Rally token is the underlying token for that chain, and token holders get to decide, which new creators do they want to onboard onto the platform, what direction does the protocol go in the future, like what upgrades should they implement, things like that. So that's another form of tokens, and yeah, there's a whole world of tokens out there, and like we're only seeing more and more every day.
Right. So, for example, when a company or like an organization first release a token, right? How do they sell it, right? So I think there's a term called like initial coin offering, where they offer the token to exchange, and then the exchange can sell it. So it's similar to like IPO, right? So like, what exactly is token sale, and then, like maybe what's the difference between like IPO and like ICO?
Yeah, so taking a step back first, you kind of think about like why do people want to do these token sales, right? So as I mentioned, these tokens are integral to the success and the integrity of the network, right? You basically need token holders to incentivize activity, positive activity of these networks. So therefore, the idea is that you should probably aim to have as many token holders as possible to make your network as decentralized as possible, right? Because say if you only had, say you're launching, Tony, your Tony chain, right? And then you only are able to get tokens in the hands of 10 people. then only those 10 people are validating your network and stuff. That's not a very like good solution. That's not that much better than a centralized database. So you would ideally want to get Tony Coin into as many people in the hands of as many people as possible, and therefore like all these people can help secure your network together. So there's that component, and the other component is the more people holding Tony Coin, the bigger the community, and the more like people are excited about your project, more likely someone's going to build on it, or like there's more like excitement in general, right? So that leads to the question: how do you get the token into the hands of people? So then that leads to different token distribution mechanisms. So before we go into think about token sales, we think about token distributions. So there are a lot of different methods for distribution. There was a period of time, like in 2017, like the hardest thing was just do an ICO, which is, you kind of similar to what you said on IPO, where people launch the Genesis block with their blockchain. They say, we're going to do this event. We're going to sell X amount of tokens. Each token is going to be sold at Y price. And then they're just going to do this public sale and people can participate. So you saw a lot of like large token sales back then, like, Filecoin, for example, that raised $200 million. Then people thought about different structures, like airdrops were really hot for a while. Like because in crypto, there's a lot of regulatory uncertainty. So I think people were thinking about, all right, if I don't want to take the money of these people because that has regulatory complications, how do I get tokens into the hands of people without actually taking money? So that's when we saw airdrops where, for example, Definity had a 2018 community airdrop where people who were subscribed to the newsletter would get tokens if they were KYC. So, they did that for like 50,000 people or 60,000 people back in 2018. Then, as the industry moved on, there started to be like new models. So, for example, DeFi became a thing. So people are thinking, all right, how do we kind of get around the KYC requirements of like traditional token sales? Because when you're doing a token sale, you start to run into legal risk, right? So you start seeing like people launching a new token and then creating a liquidity pool on a Balancer or Uniswap, and then anyone can go and participate. So that was a new model. Then we saw things like NuCypher, where they had this work lock where if you lock up your ETH for X amount of period, then you're eligible to receive a pro rata share of like the total amount of tokens that's released in the Genesis block of NuCypher. So you kind of see like there's a bunch of different like evolutions, different tweaks in terms of like how these token distributions work. But yeah, the simplest, to kind of go back to your question, the simplest model is just the token sale, where you just list at a price. You choose X amount of supply you're releasing, and then you choose different options for that sale, and then each option has a certain price and certain lockup periods associated with them, and then people come and purchase. Yeah, and we facilitate that process.
Yeah, and speaking of ICOs, I know Coinlist has I know like coins like Algorand has started from Coinlist. What was different about that made it like a very successful ICO, and like what kind of services do those tokens usually provide?
Yeah, so Algorand was a pretty interesting one. Whether or not it's a successful sale, like it kind of comes down to like how you interpret it. So Algorand was able to raise a lot of money for a few reasons. One was that was the first time we used a Dutch auction structure. So a lot of times, like for these token sales, we kind of have stayed away from the ICO language or like the terminology, and we now talk about like token distribution instead of like ICO. That's kind of a terminology we've kind of the industry has moved past a bit. So Algorand was interesting in that like we did a Dutch auction, so there was like price discovery involved, and Algorand at the time was a very like hyped up project. A lot of people were very excited about it. They have an amazing team. They have really cool technology. So that led to a very, very high like valuation. In addition to that, they had this structure where there was this 90% price guarantee, basically saying that like for X amount of time, like token purchasers of that sale could come back and redeem their tokens at 90% price, if the price were to like drop off or something like that. So that led to a lot of capital flowing in, but then that also kind of backfired a little bit in the sense that like you know, that led to a lot of capital. And yeah, so that was a bit of a complicated one. And the Algorand project is still doing super well. They're continuing to deliver on the technology and everything, but yeah, I think the Dutch auction was really what made that sale particularly interesting.
Got it. And you mentioned that, right, the ICO, like one goal of ICO is like to distribute the token to like as many people as they can, right? So, but at the same time, they're still like raising the fund, right, during this process of selling the token. So would you say the primary goal of maybe releasing a token is to like having more people have the tokens or to raise the fund for the project?
Yeah, so I think where the market is right now is come to a point where it's all about distribution. So, or at least for projects that Coinlist works with, I think there's certainly projects out there that are looking for just money and just want to raise a lot of capital. But most of the projects that we work with, because so Coinlist does a very we kind of like pride ourselves and we have a very high bar from a quality perspective, right? So we only work with the top projects out there. And if you're a top project out there, you basically have extremely high access to capital. You don't need us to get capital. You can easily go out, raise a private round at a certain valuation and get a lot of capital. That's not as valuable in this current market condition. What's valuable in this market condition is I can get money, but what's more important is building my community. If I want to launch a blockchain that is meant to kill Ethereum or meant to be the next big project, I need tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of users, right? And therefore, that's where Coinlist becomes important. So recently, for example, we did the rally sale. We grew their active wallet count from a few thousand to tens of thousands of people, and that was really what made the sale very attractive from the issuer perspective. It's they see these things happening, they see how much distribution Coinlist can bring in, they see the brand name that Coinlist can associate with their project, then they come and they want to work with us because of that.
Got it. So it's like the exchange actually helped them to get more people having token instead of only having them raising fund, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think for the top projects, fundraising is a lot more secondary than distribution, certainly, or at least basically all of the ones I've worked with are like that.
Okay, so how do you get select those top project, right? So is there any criteria, right, when a token goes to an exchange, right?
It's a bit of a soft process. There's not hard science to it. I think there's certain signals that you can look at, right? So for example, whether or not they have some actually interesting technology that differentiates themselves from other projects. That's number one. Second thing that we look for obviously is the team's reputation, their past fundraising history, who their partners are. I think it's a small space. Reputation is very important and quality is very important, and you can kind of suss that out based on who the past investors are. Seeing whether or not they've delivered in the long term and things like that. And the other thing is, obviously thinking about kind of the market opportunity in general, whether or not what they're working on is something that's interesting in the market as overall. So yeah, I think the tech and the product, the team, the fundraising history, the signal, and kind of just the general market opportunity are the kind of three main criteria that we kind of generally look at. But yeah, it's a pretty soft process. It's not we score them in a certain way. And, yeah.
And is there a maybe recent example of a successful token on Coinlist?
Yeah, so we've been doing a lot of token sales recently. We're doing basically one every week or one every few weeks. So we recently did we've done 5 sales in 2021 so far. So we did Casper, Rally, Mina, Clover, and Covalent, all of which basically sold out and had every single one had I think 30,000 or 20,000 plus participants and hundreds of thousands of registrants. So yeah, by that standard, it was massive success. lot of demand on the market. All these project teams are continuing to deliver. Very excited to like work with them. So yeah, from a distribution perspective, like all of them have basically reached their goals and like, if not like wanting more. So yeah, so I would say all these sales have been extremely successful.
Oh yeah, and then usually like who are the purchasers of these token sales? Are they like large institutional investors or like just individuals or?
Yeah, so it's definitely a mix. So we have a lot of institutions on the platform. We have a lot of retail users on the platform as well. So it's definitely the mix. It kind of comes down to the structure of the sale. So for example, in uh, the rally sale, for example, right? It's a liquid token on the market already and then the sale cap was capped at $1,000. That's a little bit less attractive to institutions because like $1,000 check isn't really gonna like do an institution any good. Like that's just not enough an allocation for them to really care about. So in a sale like that, we'll see less institutional activity. But then, in other sales such as like Casper, we had four different options for the sale, and one option specifically was tailored towards institutions. So like that one had a higher minimum of like $50,000 and a higher sale cap. I think it was like $250,000. So that check size is more attractive to institutions, and then we will see more institutional participation in those things. Or like for example, with Flow, we did the Flow token sale. I don't know if you know their team that did like the NBA Top Shot. So with them, we had a community sale structure that had a low cap that was tailored towards retail, so a lot of retail users come and buy, and then followed by an auction which had much higher sale caps. That was much like for auctions. Typically, we see more institutions because that's more sophisticated. Like it's harder for a retail person to just like throw a price and decide like this is what the token project should be valued at. So then you see a lot more institutional activity for auction sales. Yeah.
Got it. So like when there's like a large amount of institutional investor in those tokens, how does it influence the ecosystem, right? So like intuitively, like if they want to distribute a token to more user, right? They probably don't want a lot of institutional buyers, or is that the case?
I would say institutions are actually extremely important for these token projects as well. So um, the reason being, it's certainly extremely important to have retail in the sense that like you as we said, we want to get tokens in the hands of a lot of people. So we have like just independent network provider like network validators and everything, right? But institutions also bring on certain expertise. So, for example, we see with a lot of DeFi projects, they want to get certain number of institutions on because these institutions are usually a lot more informed in terms of like governance changes and like network upgrades. Like they can kind of help provide good guidance as to like what direction would be beneficial for the project. A lot of times they have like strategic strategic value. So for example, you can imagine if you launch a project and you have an institution that holds a significant chunk of your tokens, and now you're looking to like do new strategic initiatives. They have some incentive to help you out, right? They will bring some strategic value to your project, especially when you're thinking about like fundraising and stuff like that. So yeah, I would say both types of users and both types of token holders are very indispensable for networks in general.
Got it. So like when the institutional holders like have more tokens, they're like a big shareholder and they will like care about the project more, right, and provide some guidance.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. And so yeah, so what are like how are the tokens that are like being regulated today in the US? I know like it's like definitely a new field, and then there's a lot of like regulations, right?
Yeah, so there's I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really speak to it very well. But there's currently a lot of regulatory uncertainty with regards to token sales in the U.S. in particular. So Yeah, to be honest, I don't really have a good answer as to like how it's being regulated. Like our team has, multiple like legal background people for that very reason. So yeah, it's definitely something that's being cleared up over time, and so we're hoping to get more clarity in the next few months, not years. Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I know right now like there's a lot of like crypto blowing up, like Ethereum, Dogecoin, and it's relatively new industry. So what do you think about like the future of token sales?
Yeah, it's token sales are interesting in that I guess crypto in general is just really hard to predict in terms of like what's gonna happen. There for a period of time, like actually we were just having this conversation internally today, during a call. Like, back in 2017, everyone was doing these token sales thinking like, all right, we want to launch our own layer one blockchain. We want to be the Ethereum killer. We want to be like the one, layer one that everyone builds dApps on top of and stuff, right? So then we saw a period of time when it was just a bunch of layer ones, and naturally, layer ones will have tokens for reasons we discussed earlier. So then token sales were kind of limited in that market. And then, after a certain point, you think to yourself, where like there can only be so many layer one projects out there. So like you would think, all right, token sales is probably gonna end at some point. But then we started seeing like DeFi projects popping up all over the place, and then they started launching all sorts of like governance tokens. And then for a period of time, they were doing it primarily on DeFi platforms. They didn't really rely on like Coinlist or other token listing platforms out there. Then at a certain point, I think they realized that the DeFi route is a decent one, but there are still a lot of like regulatory challenges if you were to go down that route. So then they can't start coming back to like CoinList and other platforms asking to do token sales with us, and then so that's interesting. And then now we're seeing like the Polkadot ecosystem pop up, and there's like these parachain offerings, and that's opened up a whole new like token sale market, because there's a whole new ecosystem of projects being built out there, and we're starting to see a lot of other projects coming out that aren't layer ones, but are also asking to have like thinking about having their own tokens. So like Rally is a very good example. They're not a layer one, but a token makes sense in their ecosystem, and so therefore they did a token sale. And so yeah, so I think the token sale, you know, ecosystem is here to stay, or at least in the short to medium term. I don't know for the long term. It's always hard to predict what's going to happen in the long term in crypto. But yeah, I do think it's definitely flourishing, and we're seeing a lot more business than like we saw a few years ago. So, and I think part of that is also just the number of high quality projects has increased a lot. I think in 2017 we saw a lot of token sales, but those sales were for a lot of these sales were for like projects that were just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. Versus now, like I think the use cases in crypto are starting to become a little bit more obvious, and the infrastructure is starting to be mature a little bit more. So then the number of high quality projects are popping up more, and which leads to more good token sales. Yeah.
Yeah, and then lastly, as more and more companies are adding like like crypto or different types of like coins to their portfolio, do you think like these crypto tokens will become like a mainstream investment in the future? As considering like there's a lot of institutions that are really skeptical right now, still skeptical or just not trusting in the environment right now.
Yeah. So we're already starting to see that. I think this current bull market is very, very much largely driven by institutional adoption. So, personally, I think the reason why like Bitcoin popped up a lot and like ETH popped up a lot recently is just because there's more institutions buying it. There's a lot more demand in the market. The more institutions buy it, the more mainstream media talks about it, and the more adoption happens in general, right? So I think a perfect example is when the news that like Tesla bought a crazy amount of Bitcoin went out. There was a huge craze around Bitcoin. Bitcoin price shot up. Like, I think the more institutions get into it, just the more awareness there is in general, and then the more people get into this field. And you know, part of it's also just realistically how much of the capital out there in the market in general is held by institution versus retail, right? Like a significant chunk is institutions. So that's just a big part of the demand. And as funds and institutions get into something more established like Bitcoin and Ethereum, they start to become more familiar with crypto in general, right? If they hold these things, they start researching these things, start understanding it, then they'll feel more comfortable with other types of crypto assets. And like as other crypto assets mature, I think these institutions will be more inclined to like pick up, add more of those to their balance sheets and stuff. So I think we're starting to see that happen. I think 2020 and 2021 were big institution years. I think we're still a few years away from like real mass adoption. I think there's still a lot of work to be done from an infrastructure perspective and from like a general education perspective. I think, personally, I think even though a lot of people are starting to buy crypto, like people are not really understanding what they're buying. Like I think a perfect example is Doge, right? Like you hear all these people buying Dogecoin. How many people actually understand how Dogecoin works? How many people actually know how the Dogecoin like blockchain works? How many people know the fact that like the Doge blockchain isn't really functional? Those are important questions. So, but that require a lot of education, and I think crypto education in general is just very difficult because of how technical it is and how complex it is. So I think it takes time, but I definitely think that like adoption will happen over time, and it's just a matter of people putting in the effort and the energy into it.
Got it. Yeah, like token is definitely like a exciting field, and we will see where it will go. So yeah, that wrap up our discussion today. And thanks, Spencer, again, and thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.